All right. I'm Nelson Osaki, and I'm introducing Josh Michaels. He is an independent app developer and co-founder of Judson Creative. He's been developing apps for the iPhone, iPad, and Mac ever since the App Store opened. His two biggest hits include the relaxation app, Magic Window, and the comic game, Ow My Balls. Yes, the same person made both of these apps. Previously, Michael has worked at a variety of companies, ranging in size from large, like Microsoft and Motorola, to small, like Doppelganger, Up Company, and TalkBox. Michael was born and raised in Urbana, Illinois during the rise of the Internet. He first spoke at the 4th RP in 1998 and was involved in the conference staff until 2004. He was ACM SIGGRAPH Chair in 1999, ACM Chair in 2000, a serial EOH participant and co-creator of Puzzle Hack, which is now Puzzle Bang, and despite all this, managed to graduate with a degree in computer science in 2002, having never once been put on academic probation. And without further ado, here is Josh Michaels.
Thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here. So my name is Josh Michaels, and rather than introduce myself, I'll let the 5-year-old version of me introduce myself. Joshua Michaels is 5.5 years old and lives in Urbana, Illinois. He likes to watch Knight Rider, Twilight Zone, and Misfits of Science on TV. His favorite foods include spaghetti, pizza, hot dogs, hamburgers, and fish planks. When he's older, he would like to be an aerotechnologist. So those were my dreams. And yes, I was a townie. I grew up here. I was walking into DCL about 20 minutes ago and heard some people coming out saying, yeah, every year there's an old guy talk, and Josh Michaels is the old guy talk this year. I'm like, oh man, am I really the old guy talk? And then I pulled out my old badges, and I spoke at Reflections Projections in 1998 when I was a freshman here. That means that this is 15 years since I first spoke, so yeah, I am the old guy. During my time here, I worked on a variety of different projects across the board. I just loved working on projects with all sorts of different people. And one of the final projects I worked on was this thing called Puzzle Hack, which ultimately evolved into Puzzle Bang. And I'm so grateful that there's still a puzzle event going on as part of ACM. David and Ben are just amazing to me that they carry this on. It's truly incredible. There's nothing cooler than coming back here and seeing people still doing puzzles. When I was in ACM in the early days, I remember coming in and saying, well, what is this Mechmania thing? Why do we do Mechmania, right? Like, what's the point? Why is that part of it? It's just part of conference. Mechmania is just part of conference. It's always been part of conference. Like, why wouldn't we do Mechmania as part of conference? But that was only like 3 years after it started. And now with puzzles, it's the same thing. Why wouldn't we have puzzles as part of conference? So you too can create contributions here, both in ACM and in conference, and make things that may end up lasting much longer than you do here. So as said in the introduction, I'm an independent app developer. I run my own app studio. That's myself and a handful of collaborators. I make a relaxation app called Magic Window. On the Mac, it makes it so that your desktop wallpaper can slowly change over time. So for example, rather than being a picture of a sunset at a particular moment, it's slowly changing over the course of the day. But unfortunately, I got slightly internet famous for a game I created called Ow My Balls, which is a game about getting kicked in the nuts. In 2009, it was the #1 free app in the App Store for some time, doing something like 1.1 million installs in a week. And if I have some early advice to you, don't make your claim to fame game about getting kicked in the nuts. So this talk is titled Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in ACM, except for a few things that I'll cover in this talk. My intention with making this talk was to say, well, if I were to come back and tell myself some advice, having been out of college for about 10 years, what is the advice that I would give myself? What would I tell myself I should focus my time on? What would I tell myself I should do the same, do differently? And that's the essence of this talk, is advice from me to myself. And hopefully it's applicable to people here too. However, I have no idea if school is the same today as when I was in school. So please stop me if I mention things that are just like, that's old. Nobody does that anymore. All right, so first and foremost, the most important thing that I needed to know to succeed was that you really need to collect great people. That the most important key to success is the relationships that you have with other folks. I could not tell you how to do any of the physics that I learned when I was in college. I could probably not tell you how to do any of the math that I learned while I was in college. I can still tell you quite a bit about how to program, but there's so much that's been forgotten. But what I can do is call up people at all of the major technology companies who I met while I was here and maintained relationships with even after I left and make things happen. So whether it's calling up someone at Twitter and getting an account taken down, calling up someone at Apple and getting help with a problem, the people who were with me in ACM when I was here 10 years ago, almost all of them are in these amazing places of power now. It's really hard to believe. Every time I meet someone I haven't seen in a while, I'm like, oh my goodness, look, wow, I had no idea that you had gotten here. So by collecting great people while you're here and building strong relationships while you're here, when you go out into the rest of the world, if you hold on to them, they become the most valuable asset that you have. Collecting great people is what has made me successful, because it's the people who I work with who help drive my success and inspire me to continue moving forward. So the most important thing by far is the relationships that you create while you're here and your ability to maintain those relationships after you leave. You want to be able to call up that guy who turns out to be, well, let's see, the head of technology at the US Senate, or the founder at this company, or that company, or that company, and say, hey, I need your help. Hey, what do you think about this? Well, that's what you get to do if you build great relationships here and you hold on to them. The second is to focus on projects. I am not one who spent an extraordinary amount of time in class. I was the student who did everything that they could to find activities outside of class that got me excited. A lot of what goes on in the classrooms here, and in pretty much all schooling up until the graduate level, is this kind of simulation that doesn't really exist in the real world, right? In many classes, you're asked to just memorize stuff and then repeat that memorization. Well, that's kind of silly, because in the real world, you just Google it, right? Like, I don't know how to answer a bunch of your math questions, but I can look them up on Google right now, no problem. So this idea that you memorize a bunch of stuff and then you go in a room and compete against your peers to see who remembered it all the best, it doesn't really make any sense to me, because that doesn't have any real practical application outside of these walls. But projects do. The way that you go about creating a project here at the university, whether it's a student project or anything else, is no different than how you create a project in the real world. It's a team of people trying to work together effectively to create something that's really, really cool. Creation of projects here within the academic environment and outside of the academic environment, man, it's basically the same thing. Basically the same. Except you guys have the luxuries of having a lot of people around who can help you have time on their hands. So developing student projects and working on things like conference, making things for engineering open house, all of this is super essential. And this is how you build those relationships, and this is how you meet those people who end up being so valuable to you 5 to 10 years later in life, is by working with them on projects right here, right now. Life is not a competition on who's smartest. I mean, it's this whole system that we have of putting kids up being, who can spell the best? I don't care. If it's, red, underlined, squiggly, I right-click and pick the right spelling. It's no big deal. But inside these walls, it's often a competition on who is smartest. And I think getting past that is something that can be hard to do. It can be quite strange when you go from this environment where you can be put heads up against one of your peers to see who remembered stuff the best, and then 6 months later you're working at a company and you're asked to sit down and collaborate with that same person. Well, you were just heads up competing on who was smartest. Now you're being asked to work together. How do you make that transition? It's quite tough. But if you're working on projects throughout your whole time in school, that transition isn't there, because the experience of collaborating with other people gets you to realize that, yeah, everyone here is smart, and everyone here is talented. And the way to get far is to work with those talented people. So to go fast, go alone. To go far, go together. As an indie app developer who does the vast majority of work from programming to marketing to everything else around my products, I can't emphasize enough that it's not just me. It's all the people in my network who I call for feedback, who I ask for help or input, right? Nothing big ever happens out of one person. So if your goals are grander than making a game about being kicked in the balls, You're going to need to get some people to work with you to do that. And you're going to need to know how to effectively work with them so you aren't yelling at each other and debating over which pixel should be to the right and which pixel should be to the left. All right? Real artists ship. I just gave away my next joke. Real artists ship. And this is really, really key. ACM gives a fantastic opportunity with Engineering Open House and with ACM Conference to ship something. This conference is shipping. Congratulations to everyone here who worked on conference. You all just shipped. That's freaking awesome. You guys know how hard this thing is to put on? It is tough. And these guys just shipped, and my guess is that those same guys are going to be shipping and working together for the next 10 years in some ways, shapes, or forms. So working on conference, doing projects for Engineering Open House, doing projects in your spare time, until you've actually shipped, meaning you took that thing out and you showed it to other people, you haven't gotten the full experience of software engineering. You get that experience when you take that thing that you built and you show it to other people, and you get their input and you get their feedback. All right, so I already gave away the joke. Cheat. I want to encourage you to cheat. Because everyone in the real world cheats. I'm going to tell you a story about a time I cheated. And hopefully they don't take my degree back. During my senior year, it was finals time, and I was in a pretty crappy situation. Do you ever have that dream that you woke up and you're like, oh crap, I just didn't ever attend that class, and now there's a final today, and oh, what am I, yeah, that happened. So I took a course called CS 258. I think it's 358 now. Numerical methods. Do they still teach that class? Is the instructor here? Okay, well, good. At least the instructor's not here. So I really didn't want to take this class in the first place. I wasn't interested in it. It didn't really fit with anything that I was into. But the department required that I take it. And I was able to kind of just squeak by, showing up for the tests and using my own smarts to do the best that I could. But when it came to finals time, I realized that I basically knew nothing about what had been taught in the class. And not only that, but I had a C-. Now, here, they still have that rule that if you get a D, it doesn't count. Like, you have to get a C or better in core classes. I don't know. When I was here, if you got a D, it didn't count. You had to take it again. To me, D means done. So it really, this idea that I was going to have to retake this class that I didn't want to take in the first place, because maybe I was a % or two off, really bugged me. But I had this problem, which was that I had this test that I needed to take for numerical methods, and I also had a software engineering project for the software engineering class going on, and I had exams in 2 other classes, which I was actually interested in and really into. So I had to decide how to prioritize my time. What do I do? Do I take the risk that I'm going to fail this exam and have to retake the course, or do I compromise my engineering project? Like, what do I do? And I came up with a plan. See, what I realized was that this was a course where the instructor had an extremely big curve, because he liked to give tests where all students failed. You got anyone have an instructor like that? Yeah. What the hell? So, I had this instructor who consistently gives tests where the class average is 55%. And they're like, okay, you got 55%, that's an A. Great. Whew. So I started to think about it, and I was like, okay, numerical methods. There's only 5 choices on the Scantron. Could I pick one choice, just one letter for every answer, and potentially score high enough that I could get a passing grade? I mean, if 55% is an A, and 45% is a B, and 35% is a C, well, I need 35%. Could I get that by picking just one letter? So I did some quick research online and found that there's actually quite a bit of data on this out there. C is the most common letter. Write that down. Not the instructors, though. And so having read a bunch of internet articles about this, I decided that C was going to be my letter. And I proceeded to fully blow off the exam until I showed up for the final and sat there for about 2 hours and made it look like I was actually doing work. At the end of 2 hours, I sat there and I looked at all the C's, kind of casually glanced around me. I didn't copy anyone's answer. I just took an average to make sure that, it wasn't A. And that average indicated C. Like, okay, I think I got it. My most nervous moment was turning the test in, because I figured the highest odds of getting caught doing this would be someone seeing a Scantron that was a hole in one. I mean, it was obvious what had happened if you just looked at the freaking thing. But if the instructors don't care enough to look at the thing, then hey, that's their problem. I got a B+, 45%. That is what I call applied numerical methods. My friends were quite angry at me when they heard about this because many of them had studied hard. And not only did I get a 45% and a B+, but I also got the Software Engineering Award for the school for that year for having completed the software engineering project that I was doing. And I got A's in those 2 other classes that I actually cared about. So it sounds like y'all are cool with this cheating thing, but I brought along a friend, Admiral James T. Kirk, just to reinforce what I'm saying here.
Why are you so happy?
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I don't suppose you do.
Hello, ladies. Taking the test again.
You gotta be kidding.
Yeah, tomorrow morning, and I want you there.
I've got better things to do than watch you embarrass yourself for a 3rd time. I'm a doctor, Jim. I'm busy.
Bones, it doesn't bother you that no one's ever passed the test.
Jim, it's the Kobayashi Maru. No one passes the test, and no one goes back for 2nds, let alone 3rds.
I gotta study.
Study my ass.
We are receiving a distress signal from the USS Kobayashi Maru. The ship has lost power and it's stranded. Starfleet Command has ordered us to rescue them.
Starfleet Command has ordered us to rescue them. Captain.
2 Klingon vessels have entered the neutral zone and are locking weapons on us.
That's okay?
That's okay?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Did he say don't worry about it? Is he not taking the simulation seriously?
3 more Klingon warbirds decloaking and targeting our ship. I don't suppose this is a problem either.
They're firing, Captain.
Alert medical beta, prepare to receive all crew members from the damaged ship.
And how do you expect us to rescue them when we're surrounded by Klingons, Captain?
Alert medical.
Our ship is being hit. Shields at 60%.
I understand.
Should we, I don't know, fire back?
No.
Of course not.
What is this? What's going on?
Armed photons, prepare to fire on the Klingon warbirds.
Yes, sir.
Jim, their shields are still up.
Are they?
No, they're not.
Fire on all enemy ships. 1 photon each should do. Let's not waste ammunition.
Target locked and acquired on all warbirds. Firing.
All ships destroyed, Captain.
Begin rescue of the stranded crew. So, we've managed to eliminate all enemy ships. No one on board was injured, and the successful rescue of the Kobayashi Maru crew is underway.
How the hell did that kid beat your test?
I do not know.
So this is pretty universal, right? This is how it goes. A test where more than 60%, where the majority of students get less than 50% is a bad test made by a bad instructor. And you absolutely have the right to cheat in that case. You should not have instructors who are doing this, period. It's just not acceptable. It may make them feel good, but it's not acceptable. So if you find yourself in that situation, cheat. The next one is build on others' work. I showed DCL in the background here because I think it's a great metaphor for this. This is actually a building constructed around another building. Do you guys know this? Have you seen this? So if you are walking down the corridor out there, you'll notice that it's brick wall and windows on the right, and it looks totally different on the left, and that's because there was a building here before, and then they built this whole shell around the building. And I think that's a great metaphor for software and everything else in engineering, where everything that you do should build on stuff that was done by people before you. When I'm going to go add a new feature to one of my apps, the first thing I do is go and look online and see if somebody has already implemented that in a way that I can just pull it down from GitHub and use it, right? It could very well be that 3 people have done it, and I don't like any of their solutions, and I look at all 3 solutions on GitHub and decide to make my own based on what I learned there. But pretty much every time that I need to go add a new feature to one of my apps, I can find code from somebody else who has already done it in a way that I can just take that code and reuse it. And just because it's on GitHub doesn't mean it's good. I've gotten some really bad code off GitHub. You can't just take that code and use it. You got to really look at it. But for the most part, anytime there's something that you want to add to something you're doing, you'll find someone out there who's already done it. And you can at least learn from them about how they did it before doing it yourself. This whole macho, I built my own OS and I only run on my own OS and I do everything myself and screw around, yeah, it's mostly a waste of time. It's best to just build on other people's work when it's available and learn from other people based on what they've done before. Here's some pictures of DCL under construction. I found this in the 1989 Alumni magazine, which looks like it was written in the 20s based on the font and style. Talk about old. And the other half of that is contribute. You can't just build on other people's work. You have to contribute back. So if you're pulling down lots of stuff out of GitHub to use in your projects, and say you're making modifications to it, you got to push those back up and give them back to other people. If you end up making some really cool component that would be great for other folks, clean it up and put it on GitHub. GitHub is the new resume. Okay, I noticed that they're still taking paper resumes here, which is all cool. But for the most part, if you have an awesome GitHub account that shows that you're active in that community, that you're making contributions, that's all you need to get a job. You don't really need much more than that. So build on other people's work and be sure to contribute back. We used to have a collection of old exams in ACM. Does that still exist? Okay, so back in my day, for years and years and years, back in the old days when we used punch cards, when people took a test, they would get their results back and then they'd put it in this box in the ACM office. And this box contained tests from a wide variety of classes, which you could then go look at and study from. It was pretty rare that an instructor actually reused one of these tests, but it did happen occasionally. But you could still study and learn from these old tests to get a sense of the kinds of questions. This died because people stopped putting tests back in. It was like, oh, wow, we've got all these tests now. You know, I'm not going to bother putting my test in the box. Who cares? But the classes change. Everything changes, and now there's no box of tests to study from. So if you don't contribute back, the system doesn't work. You've got to both build on other people's work and make the contribution. All right, challenge authority. So I worked at Microsoft for 4 years. It was a great experience. I learned a lot from it. You may think, oh my God, Microsoft, that's so old. Back when I was in school, that was the Google. And I know it seems totally strange, but that was the desirable place to go. Google isn't. Where do you go now? Where's the cool place? Not even Google, right? Is it Facebook? Is that the cool place to go? All right, whatever. Microsoft used to be that. It's hard to believe. And when I was an intern, one of the great perks that they give you is you get to go meet Bill Gates at his house. You get to go hang out at his house for several hours. Eat, ask questions, etc., etc. So this was a really fantastic benefit of being a Microsoft intern. I don't know if they still do it, but if they do, it's worth being an intern there just to get this opportunity. So anyway, I went to Bill's intern dinner with a friend of mine at the time, Pavan Tamati. Kind of doubting anybody here knows him, but if you do, he's a bit of a troublemaker. And after eating a burger, Bill came out and he told everybody, he's like, hey, you guys are the future. You are the future of Microsoft. We need all of you to help solve these incredibly challenging technological problems. And that's why we want you here full time. Gave this little speech to inspire us all, which is great. He says, if you have any questions, feel free to come up and ask me. And of course, he gets swarmed with people right away. And Pavan and I went up and we listened to some of the questions, and one of the questions was, Bill, what do you think about Java? And I'm like, really, you get to like go heads up with one of the most brilliant men in the whole world, and your question is, what does he think about Java? Seriously, like take this opportunity and do something good with it. Try to actually, ask him a question that's going to get you a meaningful and valuable answer. So Pavan and I went out and sat on Bill's dock for a while and talked about the whole situation and how strange it was that we were at the home of the richest man in the world. And we started talking about what question we could ask Bill that would actually inspire an interesting answer. And, Pavan and I to this day don't agree on who came up with the question, but I asked it, so I get to tell the story. So we went back and we waited in line, and eventually I got my turn. I said, Bill, many of us are here because we aspire to be like you. Right? We've seen your success, and we want that kind of success. We want to be the next Bill Gates. At this point in time, we're faced with this challenge in choosing between coming here to Microsoft and going to work at a startup. This was during the late 90s startup boom. I said, for someone who aspires to be like you, what advice would you give in making the choice between going to a startup and coming to Microsoft? So I thought that's a pretty good question. And Bill's first answer was really good at the time. He said, well, your classes don't teach you how to make great software. Making great software is something that you have to learn from working with other people who make great software. So if you want to make great software, if that's what you want to do with your life, come here to Microsoft first and learn how to make great software from us, from people who have been doing it, and then go off and start your own company. Don't think that you can just graduate school and know what you need to know to make great software, because you've got to learn from someone else. That's a pretty good answer. But it didn't really satisfy me. So I said, Bill, you were in a similar situation, right? Like, you could have gone and worked for IBM, and you instead chose to drop out and start your own business. So coming from the perspective of someone who, made the opposite choice, do you have any suggestions for us? I mean, we're trying to be you. And he said, my suggestion is that you don't start a company in software. This makes no sense. So I'm like, why? And dude, you don't forget this. He looks me dead square in the eyes and he goes, because I will fucking crush you. Dude, I am not kidding. It's not something you forget when that happens. I will fucking crush you. And I noticed the I very specifically. We are Microsoft. We're the biggest software company in the world. If you go into software, whatever you do, we're gonna be there. Now, at this point, I'm sitting around with a group of 20 other STEM students, all looking at me like, "What the hell are you doing?" And the most witty response I could come up with was, "Well, what exactly do you mean by crush?" Would you buy us out? Would you, put a bunch of other people on the same project? What exactly do you mean there? And he said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We will crush you. And I extended my hand, and he shook it, and he turned around and walked inside. I looked at everyone around me and I said, did anybody get that on tape? This was during the antitrust days.
Microsoft's behavior was certainly extreme, but it was driven less by arrogance than by fear and insecurity. Gates knew that at any moment, some puny little startup in a garage somewhere could rise up and topple Microsoft, just as they'd done to others.
That's ridiculous. I'm not using this thing. No. Somebody's confused. Somebody's just not thinking. There's no way. You guys never understood the first thing about this.
In all the times that I've met Gates, there's only been one consistent element. The moment when he looked at me and said that something I'd said was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. And I didn't even work for the guy.
So you've got to challenge authority. There's going to be a lot of times where you've got a great idea or something that you're really excited about, and you'll go to people who say, no, you're stupid. No, you're wrong. It's never going to work. And a lot of the time you are wrong, and it's not going to work. But if you just accept that you're wrong for an answer and walk away, you're never going to get anywhere new. So be sure to challenge authority. Not necessarily the way I did there, but it's key. People who are really smart in senior positions want employees who challenge them. They want employees who are going to take them down to the mat when they're wrong and stand up for what they believe in. And if you are too scared to challenge them, that's not you. Rig the system. In my junior year, I think it was, during Engineering Open House, ACM produced some incredible projects. Caffeine, the soda machine you guys have, the second generation of that was that year. There were a lot of really incredible ACM projects. There was one non-ACM project which ended up winning. And it was a drunk driving simulator. Does anybody remember this? Was anyone here? All right, someone's here. All right, awesome. Now, I was furious about this for a lot of different reasons, but one of them was because the project barely worked. It happened to work when the judges were there, but it didn't work most of the rest of the time. It was, you know, okay, well done, pretty sensational, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But one thing I noticed was that members from that team were also EOH judges. So I say, wonder what's going on here. So next year, ACM signed up 4 judges. And what we realized was that there's a pretty easy way to rig EOH. If you as a judge give things that are genuinely good a 5, and you give things that are not particularly good a 1, you increase the spread between the great things and the not so great things. Most of the other judges give everything a 5 or a 4. Because they didn't want to make a kid feel bad. He worked really hard on this project. Don't give him a 1. That's silly. But we realized that if you just rate great things with a 5 and you rate bad things with a 1, then that increases the separation between all of the things, and the great things are more likely to win. Now, we weren't allowed to judge our own projects. That was part of the rules. But it didn't matter if the projects that weren't good were getting all 1s, because it dragged everyone else's average down. So we did this and won a bunch of EOH awards. This was when I started to realize that winning EOH was not really about making the best engineering. It was about putting on the best show. And it was about making sure that the system worked in your favor. Now, the year after me, some people took this a lot further. Is anybody here when SORF was rigged? Okay. So, ACM always gets its money from a variety of different sources. And one of the sources that we didn't get money from was the SORF board, which was the group that made the decisions about how to dole out money to student groups. Well, in my year and in previous years, we'd all written SORF board off as something that just funds fraternities and parties and sporting events, because at the time that's what it did. At the time the SORF board was pretty much all fraternity people. But a group inside the ACM office hatched a plan that they were going to stack the entire SORF board with their own people, and then they could approve every funding request that ACM made. This led to the gravy years of ACM. Many of the benefits that you all have right now are still legacy of all of the money that came in from stacking the source board with ACM members. Now, is this any different than it being full of people who are in other kind of groups? No, it's not. And certainly somebody else will come along and rig that system if you don't. But very often it's rigging the system that's required to get the output that you want. Sorry if I just revealed any source secrets there. I don't see any of the guilty parties in the room. Next is sensationalize your work. Anybody here name a bridge in San Francisco? Fast. Boom! Still works. Golden Gate Bridge. It's amazing and a beautiful bridge. But it's one of several bridges in the Bay Area. And it is by far not the most technologically interesting. So here's a map of the Bay Area. The Golden Gate Bridge is up there on the left. It connects two parks. The bridge that everybody actually uses is over here. It's the Bay Bridge. Now, the Bay Bridge is a pretty incredible structure because it's actually two bridges. It's a bridge connecting to an island and then another bridge from the island over to Oakland. This was much more challenging to build and involved much more engineering prowess than the Golden Gate. However, the Golden Gate is in this beautiful area called the Golden Gate, which is surrounded by parks and other natural beauty. Well, the Bay Bridge is over here in between two cities, which, while beautiful, are not as attractive. So this is the old Bay Bridge. Not too happy, not too attractive, right? Not too cool. And it's mostly known for this, when in 1989 it partially collapsed. But this is the new Bay Bridge. Now that's sensational. This is the largest single-span, self-suspended bridge in the world. It just opened a couple weeks ago. Now the Golden Gate's got some competition. Not just that. Oh, by the way, here's the new one next to the old one. You can see the difference. Whew, what a beautiful bridge. This is the other half of the Bay Bridge, which has now become the largest light sculpture installation in the world. There's 25,000 LEDs running across every one of those lines. And they're all programmatically controlled by a computer at the base of one of the towers, which is accessed wirelessly by the artist who created this. So now you've got this incredible modern bridge on one half, and you've got the largest LED light installation in the world on the other half. That's freaking sensational. It's still the Golden Gate is what comes up the most. So it's important to realize that what makes something successful or attractive or popular is not just the engineering that goes into it. As engineers, we see the beauty in that engineering. But that's not always what makes it the thing that everybody recognizes or is the most popular or is the best. And a lot of what taught me this was the drunk driving simulator. Because when I saw the drunk driving simulator, I'm like, damn, that is sensational. A picture in the newspaper with a 9-year-old kid in a drunk driving simulator, that is genius. That's a great story. And that started my infatuation with sensationalism. So on my last year in school, I was in Fortune magazine. Here's a picture of me. I'm actually wearing a conference t-shirt. This was a ploy to get conference's logo into Fortune. And yeah, I was what's cool in 2002. Now I'm what's old in 2013. But more seriously, if you were to read this article, you would believe that I was this whiz kid who had made this super automated home where everything just magically works and is remote controlled. And well, what the hell? Here I am with a vacuum cleaner next to me. What the hell is that about? Well, this whole story came about because Velaz Dar, who was the chair at the time, came to me and said Fortune was interested in talking to some students, and he thought that they should come talk to me, but that maybe I should kind of get something set up so that it looks more interesting. I'm like, okay. I ran home and pulled out all my toys. I was super into X10 at the time. It's the wireless turn power on and off stuff. And I totally decked out my apartment. Everything was controllable wirelessly. And I had a Motorola WAP phone at the time, and I'd set it up so that I could, from my phone, turn my lights on and off or anything else. But they didn't care that I could turn my lights on and off from my phone. They didn't care that I could control my TiVo from across the street from my phone. All things that are commonplace now, but that nobody done then. What they cared was that from my laptop I could turn my vacuum cleaner on. That's so silly, right? Like I demonstrated the future of all this stuff, and all they really cared about was the vacuum cleaner. Well, the vacuum cleaner was sensational. It brings up these memories of the Jetsons and of, robots cleaning your house. It paints this picture of a future where robots clean up for you. It didn't do anything other than turn on and off. That's it. They got me this thing in fortune. And when they called me up and they're like, hey, we're sending photographers to come photograph your place, I'd actually taken everything down. I was like, oh crap, I got to put it back up. They're like, oh, don't worry, we just want to make sure to get the vacuum cleaner in the shot. I'm like, you have to be kidding me. Was that the most important thing I showed you? Well, yeah. And the coffee maker, that was the other one that really impressed them. So in this case, I'd put together all this very impressive engineering, but it was this one sensational aspect of it which actually interested them and which got this article written about me. So sensationalism is important. You need to make what you do sensational. Now then, that's all the stuff that by the time I graduated I had figured out. Now I'm going to tell you a couple things that are things I didn't figure out until after graduation. A couple of these are downers, I'm sorry. Not everything goes perfect, but I hope you can learn from them and that they inspire you moving forward. The first one is, don't expect to be an exception. And that's very hard to say to a room of exceptional people. But I can tell you that I was brought up in a context where I was being told, you're going to be the next Bill Gates. And then you come here to the university and they're like, you're going to be the next Max Levchin. That can be you. You can start PayPal. You can start YouTube. All of you can do that. Guess what? That's not true. A lot of these things happen because these folks are in a particular place at a particular time. If you haven't read Outsiders yet, by Malcolm Gladwell, I encourage you to, because it'll put your own success and your own work in context. But the problem with this fantasy that you're going to become the next, big guy, multimillionaire, Silicon Valley dude, is that happiness equals reality minus expectations. And for a long time, I wondered how it was that there were these people who were selling their businesses in San Francisco for $100 million, and like, man, that was a crappy deal. That sucked. I only got $100 million out of it. I just couldn't figure it out. It didn't make sense to me. But what I realized was, if you set your goal that you're going to sell it for $1 billion, and you only sell it for $100 million, your expectations were larger than reality. And that leads to negative happiness. So if you set yourself up to expect an extraordinary level of success, that you're going to be the next Bill Gates, look, I'm not trying to discourage you to do big things, but I'm trying to encourage you to not expect that. Because when you expect something that big, no matter what happens, the best you're going to do is meet those expectations. And if the expectations, are really big compared to reality, you're going to be disappointed. I have seen this happen to so many of my peers who get these big numbers in their head about what their stock options are worth, and then they turn out to be worth nothing. Happiness equals reality minus expectations. As soon as I stopped thinking that maybe I was going to be the next Gates, my life got a lot better. This it could be you thing, you could be the next Gates. Lottery uses the same trick. It works really, really well. And what you don't want is to end up like these people. chasing money that's never going to be there. It doesn't really matter if these are lotto tickets or stock options. It's the same thing. I've seen too many people be told that they're millionaires and end up with nothing, to not come back here and be honest with you and say that most of the time stock options have no value. Occasionally they do. And if you're really smart and intelligent and you learn from people who know how to deal with stock options, handle the taxes and everything else, yes, you can figure out how to make money from them. But don't think that just because you have stock options you're going to become a millionaire, and don't trade your life for that potential. So what's the alternative to chasing options? Is to start small. And this is what I do. Running an independent shop with only a handful of people. You know, in the talk yesterday, the dude said, he's like, well, it's interesting that it's worth more than $1 billion. Well, that eliminates like everything, right? Like most things in this world are not going to make you $1 billion. But you can build things that don't make $1 billion and they're still good. You could build things that don't make any money and they're still good. So it's best to start with something small and grow from there, rather than pursue a giant dream. And I'm going to let Derek Sivers explain this because he does a better job than me.
Watch out when anyone, including you, says he wants to do something big, but can't until he raises money. It usually means the person is more in love with the idea of being big, big, big than with actually doing something useful. For an idea to get big, 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 it has to be useful, and being useful doesn't need funding. If you want to be useful, you can always start now with only 1% of what you have in your grand vision. It will be a humble prototype version of your grand vision, but you'll be in the game. You'll be ahead of the rest because you actually started, while others are waiting for the finish line to magically appear at the starting line. For example, let's say you have a vision of making an international chain of enlightened modern schools. You picture it as a huge world-changing organization with hundreds of employees, dozens of offices, and expensive technology. But instead of waiting for that, you start by teaching somebody something this week. Find someone who will pay to learn something, meet him anywhere, and begin. It will be nothing but you, a student, and a notebook, but you'll be in business and you can grow it from there. If you want to make a movie recommendation service, start by telling friends to call you for movie recommendations. When you find a movie your friends like, they buy you a drink. Then keep track of what you recommended and how your friends liked it and improve from there. Want to start a new airline? Next time you're at the airport when a flight is canceled, offer to everyone at the gate that you'll lease a small plane and fly to their destination if they will split the costs. This is how Richard Branson started Virgin Airlines. Starting small puts 100% of your energy on actually solving real problems for real people. It gives you a stronger foundation to grow from. It eliminates the friction of big infrastructure and gets right to the point. And it will let you change your plan in an instant as you're working closely with those first customers telling you exactly what they need. Since I had already built a website for my own CD, the first version of CD Baby only took me a few days to make, and it did almost nothing. It was a list of a few CDs, each with a Buy Now button. Clicking that would put the CD in your cart and ask for your info. When you entered your info, the site would email it to me. That's it. For the first year, that's all the site did, and that's all it needed to become profitable. I spent only $500 to start CD Baby. The first month, I earned back $300. And the second month, I made $700, and it's been profitable ever since. So no, your idea doesn't need funding to start. You also don't need an MBA, a particular big client, a certain person's endorsement, a lucky break, or any other common excuse not to start.
That's it, you can start right now. Because here's the thing. Many of you are already in startups. You just call them SIGs. I'm not joking. Confinity, which became PayPal, was SIGGRAPH. Right? Your SIGs are startups. You already have amazing office space. Oh my God, I'd love to work in Siebel. It's incredible. Last 2 days I've been working out of the 4th floor Granger. I love that space. You don't need a sexy Silicon Valley office. You already have it. Many of you already have angel investors. They're your parents. All right? If someone else is paying your rent, fantastic, because you're not going to get that for the rest of your life. You are surrounded by people with spare time. When I try to find collaborators, it's always like, well, it's 60 hours a week at work right now. I've got maybe 5 hours to give you. Crap. People here have tons of time. Nothing is stopping you from going all the way right here and right now. It's entirely possible. You don't need to wait until you have a degree. It's a great article on Midwest mentality. I encourage you to read it. It asks the question why there are so many Midwesterners who go to Silicon Valley and turn out to be successful. And what it posits is that people in the Midwest come from an agricultural background, where you're farming every year, you're slowly growing your business, you're slowly growing your farm. It's extremely pragmatic. And you don't like to take risk. But people in California, they love to take risk. They love to put lots of money on the line and take a chance on something. So the most successful teams happen to turn out to be these Stanford UIUC combos. Because you get someone from here who wants to work really hard and be super pragmatic and not take too much risk, and then you get someone from Stanford who wants to take a lot of risk and get all the money. Yelp was a pairing like that. PayPal was a pairing like that. Most of the PayPal Mafia teams were pairings like that. So don't be embarrassed by the fact that you may have a Midwest mentality. That's the mentality I have. That's the mentality I work from, and I prefer to keep that mentality. However, to achieve extraordinary success, if that is your mentality, it's best to partner with somebody who has the other mentality of, I want to make a ton of money. I want to get out there and make a business out of this. Okay? Great. Those pairings work really well. So just to close, I think the whole theme here is to avoid trading today for tomorrow. You're going to encounter people for the rest of your life who make you fantastic offers. Come here and work at my startup first, and then you can go pursue your dream. Come here and work at Microsoft first, and then you can pursue your dream. Do this, and then you will get to do the thing that you want to do. Well, why can't you just do the thing that you want to do now? Why do you have to wait until you work for someone else who's doing their own thing before you do your own thing? You don't. Okay, it's a very common trick in our society to promise people the greatness of tomorrow in exchange for their time today. This is a trick that has been used for quite some time, and it works very, very effectively, and nobody is better at it than Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. So be careful about anyone who makes you an offer about trading today for tomorrow. Success is the beginning, not the end. I remember in high school, one of my peers was in 17 magazine. And at the time it was like, oh my God, he's in 17, he's set for life. That's it. Seems so stupid now. At the time I was like, oh my God, he got into 17 magazine before he lived, whoa, holy cow. It's a big deal. And then when I got into Fortune and people started treating me different, I was like, why? Nothing's different. In fact, that vacuum cleaner thing was really dumb. I think there's this perception that once you hit a success, then it's just free ride after that, right? Just, you get that success and then everything's great. But that's not the case. When you get that first success, that's the beginning. Because now you know what it takes to have a success. And now you can take that knowledge and apply it to creating other successes. So don't think, oh, I'm going to get that #1 app in the store and then that's it, I'm set for life. Nope, doesn't work. Success is the beginning. It's not the end. And finally, life isn't fair, but you all are fucking lucky. And I know that there's a lot of people in this room who struggled to get here. I'm sure of it, because I struggled to get here. However, the very fact that you are here means that you've got an opportunity in front of you that's greater than pretty much anybody on this planet. And while you may have particular struggles that are holding you back, the opportunity that you have is greater than any of that. So be sure to take advantage of that opportunity, because there are a lot of people in this world who would love to have it, and you all are privileged enough to get it. For however lucky you think you are, man, you are so lucky. So lucky. So real quick, I want to give some gratitude to a handful of folks. Back in the day, the ACM office was this. Basically, 2 closets connected. Today, you have a beautiful, fantastic office in Siebel Center. And that is in large part because of a handful of people. Dr. Sam Kamen, who is one of the greatest supporters of ACM, along with Judy Tolliver. If it wasn't for their help, ACM would not have the space that it's in today. In addition, the people who were in ACM in 1998-99, actually even really before me, were the ones who got the department to give them that space. So they deserve thanks. I also want to give personal thanks to Bruce Zimmerman. Bruce hired me at Motorola when I was a student here. He has a unique ability to pick out the smart kids who are just kind of outside of the fringe. If you trace all the people that Bruce has hired, you will find folks at the head of some of the most powerful companies in the world today. And it's some of those connections that I value the most. Bruce took a chance on me, and I appreciate that. And thank you, Bruce, because that was a huge part of what made my school experience. Thank you to conference committee. You guys do an amazing job. It's not that many of you here, but really it's incredible. And thank you all for taking the time to listen to me today. Thanks. I got a couple minutes. Any questions? Yeah.
I have a question. What's your thought on money?
Yeah, the question was, what is my thought on money? What does money mean to me? Actually, I just watched a talk the other day that answered that question better than I could, so I think I'm going to steal that answer. To me, I'm really about creating products. That's what excites me. And I think that's what makes my products great, is that my attention is not to how I'm going to make the most possible money off them, but how I'm going to make them the best possible products. Because if you create a fantastic product for which there's actually a market for, then you're going to have some reasonable degree of success. So I'd like to say, oh, I just don't worry about money, whatever. I just focus on making great products, but that's not true. I think the quote from the talk I saw was that money doesn't matter, just like the ground is below me. Like, if I run out of money, I can't do what I do. So my focus is not on making money. That's not my goal. I don't have a big number in mind where I'm like, and when I make that amount, my focus is on making great things. But money is a key part that I have to manage. And making sure that I'm continually making enough to stay afloat is very, very hard. In the App Store, revenue can be bursty, meaning that you'll get this really big burst over like 2.5 months where maybe you make $100,000, $200,000, and then you don't get many sales for the whole rest of the year. I've had to learn how to deal with the fact that my revenue might come in over 3 months and then just kind of hold that out for the year. So hopefully that answers your question. I wish I could be all, yeah, it's just about product, but it's not. You've got to have the money too.